Welcome back, everyone. My name is Joe, and over the last year, I've documented my journey of writing a first novel. In fact, a trilogy of novels called Rivendoah. I live with my husband Richard and our granddaughter Hannah on 6 acres of land nestled in the wilds of Virginia. Every Monday, I post a video sharing the joys and challenges of writing a first novel. In this week's video, I'll be sharing a treasured book in my development as both a reader and a writer. So come along and join me on my adventures in living as a writer and an artist. Hey everybody, welcome back to my author's channel here on YouTube. I thought I'd change things up a little bit today and bring you along with me into my writing room where I could talk about one of the more influential books that started me out on the road to reading. Besides, the weather has turned very cold. We're expecting another snowstorm this afternoon. And instead of hanging out huddled around a campfire outside, I thought what a perfect day to spend indoors with a hot cup of coffee. And I thought you all might enjoy that while I did a review of a treasured book that really changed my life and turned me into a lifelong reader. So anyway, why don't you come along and we'll take a peek at this first book. Before I jump into discussing the book that got me into reading, I want to give you guys an update on my progress with Rivendoah Wings of Shadow. In last week's video, I discussed sort of my struggles with the middle. So I think, and one of the things I had talked about doing was giving you maybe just a quick update at the beginning of each video each week to tell you guys what my progress on the book is. And I feel pretty good this week. I jumped into it. I think, talking about it sort of energized me, and I got into delving into some of the deeper parts of the middle that I need to deal with in order to move to the finale and the conclusion of Act 3. It still has a long way to go, but I feel good about the progress I made this week, and hopefully next week I'll be able to report even more progress. So for now, I think I'm doing pretty good, but let's go ahead and start with the reason we're here today in this video is to talk about one of the treasured books that sort of got me into being a reader. Now, on to my treasured book review. When I was between the ages of 6 and 7, I struggled with reading. I had a hard time dealing with it at school, and I didn't want to read at home. I just found it was difficult. It wasn't something that came naturally to me. Now, it wasn't for lack of exposure to reading. You know, both my parents were readers. My brothers and sisters all were readers. I was the youngest of 5. And there were always books, magazines. Dad read the newspaper every day. So there was access to reading material everywhere around me. It's just, for some reason, it was something that I personally struggled with. You know, as I said, I was the youngest of 5 brothers and sisters, none of whom seemed to have any trouble with reading. And my mother was about to embark on a new career as a 2nd grade teacher. And I was probably going from 2nd into 3rd that year. And during that summer, which was I think the summer of 1969, Mom kind of sat me down and said, you know, you are going to learn to read this summer. You're going to find the joy in reading. Well, I was very doubtful that that was going to happen, but you know, for me, summer was about running wild and being free of all schoolwork. You know, we had a river near our house. We'd go down and go fishing. We would run along the railroad tracks. We'd go caving. We'd build forts in the woods. That was kind of how I wanted to spend my summer, not inside reading. So I was doubtful that that was going to happen, but my mom was right, and I did become a reader that summer. In the first few weeks of that summer, I remember my grandmother came down to visit, and one morning I woke up and there were 3 or 4 books on my bed that I had never seen before. She had picked up, going through the house, had picked up some books that had once been my uncle's, and that were mystery books that he had read as a boy. And so she handed them to me and said, you know, why don't you go ahead and give these a try and see if you would enjoy reading them. Of course, I resisted. I did not want to have anything to do with reading. That was schoolwork as far as I was concerned. I wanted to spend my summer vacation free of anything like that. But I remember there were a couple of rainy days in a row, and like on the second rainy day of being stuck in the house, I was completely bored, and so I picked up one of the books. I remember looking at it. In fact, it looked a lot like this book right here. This was not the book that I had, but it was the same. It had no cover on it. It was it seemed like an old book to me. But you know, it was short, fairly short, and the chapters were short. So I went ahead and picked it up and I began reading it. The book was called The Missing Chums. And it was one of the Hardy Boy mystery books by Franklin W. Dixon, as you can see here. Of course, looking at this dusty old book, I asked myself, what is a chum? You know, I didn't get it. But I opened it up and I began reading, and it was slow going at first. I remember I tried to read a chapter a day, and I think there's 20 chapters or 25 chapters in each of these books. So it took me nearly 2 weeks to get through the first book. But by the end, I was entranced by the stories, the adventure, and the characters, and the solving of the mystery. I immediately picked up the second book upon finishing the first, and my exciting journey as a reader had begun. I soon realized I could start my own collection of Hardy Boy books. My uncle's books were written in the 1930s and 40s, and I just had a few of them, but I've realized, I've came to find out that there was an updated version of the stories that were called the Blue Books, because they all had blue covers. And one day when I had gone to the store with my mother or my dad, I can't remember which, I saw the whole collection of them at a store called J.J. Newberry's, which was sort of a department store, which was on Main Street in the town that I grew up in, small town I grew up in. Over the next several years, I would pick one up every time my parents went shopping there until I had nearly all the Hardy Boy stories. I read The Missing Chums several times over the years, and the Blue Book version is the one I sort of remember the most. It had updated illustrations in the beginning and the end, and several throughout the books that really kind of fired my imagination as a boy, and got me on loved the idea of the adventure and the mystery. And so it had those illustrations, and it had these nice cover illustrations that were absolutely beautiful. And you can see here, this is the Missing Chums that I read probably multiple times over the years, in addition to all the others. I just became addicted to them and read them all, collected them all. It was partly collecting them that was half the fun. Unfortunately, my collection of those Blue Book Hardy Boy novels have been lost to time. But even more than kind of the loss of those books, which happens when you grow up and move on and go to college and start your own life and go to work, and I sort of left those behind. And but it was really more so even in the Blue Books, it was that original 1930s, 40s, 20s book that I sort of thought about. And the one my grandmother had given me, and I sort of really longed to see it again. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about finding that book again. Here in Richmond, there is a wonderful antiquarian bookstore called the Black Swan that carries rare and used books. I had been on the hunt for an old copy of The Lord of the Rings that I had read as a child also, and when I was looking for it at this store called the Black Swan, which is one of those wonderful bookstores that you can just get lost in. It has little nooks and crannies and high bookshelves that you kind of wander around inside of. It's a great place, and in fact, I'm thinking about featuring it maybe in the third book of my Rivendoah Trilogy. I have another bookstore I'm going to feature in book 2. So maybe in book 3, I really haven't seen a spot for it in book 1, but maybe I will. If not, definitely in book 3, I'd like to get the Black Swan as a location. But anyway, in looking through the bookshelves for that copy of the Lord of the Rings, I came across The Missing Chums. and it had this beautiful cover on it, which the original that I remember reading did not have the cover. You can sort of see it here. Upon opening it, I saw that it was one of the original published copies from 1928 that looked exactly like the first book I had read so many years ago. I bought it on the spot and immediately added it to my collection of books. These Hardy Boy books can hardly be called literature. They sort of harken back more to the pulp fiction of the late 30s and 40s, and some of the dialogue in these books is simply atrocious. In fact, I thought I would read a little bit, and you can kind of get a feeling for how bad it is. Let me just start by a little bit of dialogue here. It says, "You certainly ought to have a dandy trip." "I'll say we will, Frank. We sure wish you could come along." Frank Hardy grinned ruefully and shook his head. "I'm afraid we're out of luck, Joe. Joe and I may take a trip later on, but we can't make it this time." "Just think of it," said Chet Morton, the other speaker. "A whole week motorboating around the coast. We're the lucky boys, huh, Biff?" Biff Hooper, at the wheel of his father's new motorboat, nodded emphatically. So that kind of gives you a little bit of a feel for the stilted dialogue in these books. But it's really about, from a boy's perspective, it's about the adventure. Any boy or girl, it doesn't really matter. But from my point of view, looking at it, it was the adventure and the mystery, and the fact that they were kids, sort of teenagers, made it more palatable to me. I guess they were sort of that and the Nancy Drew books were sort of the first young reader books that existed for younger readers. But anyway, to me, however, this book is beloved because it transports me back to a more innocent time in my life and reminds me of the origin of my love of reading. The first time I sort of could just fall into a different world through reading and be excited and transported to another place and time, which is something that always has intrigued me about reading, is the way it totally envelopes you and takes you out of the world that you're in and takes you to another world. And of course, that is, to me, the great joy of reading. So anyway, I could go on and on about the missing chums, but I just wanted to share with you guys the pivotal book that started me on the road to reading, and would eventually lead me to writing also, and in many ways teaches you how not to write, at least dialogue anyway. But I just wanted to share that with you guys and let you know a little bit about what motivates me as a writer and what got me on the road to reading. And this is one of those books. In fact, it is really sort of the book that got me started. One of the things I do want to continue to do throughout the series of videos that I create over the next year is share some of those treasured books that really affected me as a young reader and as a young adult also, that were like really, what I call treasured books in my collection of things that I have read over the years. With that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up today's video, and I hope you enjoyed, hearing a little bit about the books that have motivated me and what got me into reading. I'd be interested to hear anything you have to share in the comment section below about the books that maybe transformed you from a person who wasn't reading to a reader. that would be great to hear. So feel free to add your comments, and I'll definitely respond to each comment that's placed there. With that, I'm going to go ahead and close out, and I will see you guys in the next video.